Welcome to the North Carolina Small Business Podcast, where I talk to small business owners in North Carolina and discover the why behind their business. I'm your host, Tim Robbins. I run Today Creative, a content marketing and video production company. We are recording in North Carolina studio in Sanford, North Carolina. At one time, Sanford produced about 10% of the bricks in the United States.
I did not know that.
It is an interesting fact.
Yeah.
Well, enough about bricks. Let's talk about business. Today, our guest is Dr. Gabe Duncan, the dentist behind Spring Smiles in Holly Springs, North Carolina, and a creator of an important new course, Airway Matters Most, which addresses the topic of airway health. Welcome, Dr. Duncan.
Glad to be here.
So tell me a little bit about who you are and what you do in your day-to-day.
Well, I'm a dentist, first and foremost. I've been a dentist for 10 years now, and 11 years. And a lot of what I do is general dentistry, fillings, the things that you would think about. I have hygienists in my office, and we do fillings and we take teeth out, extractions of teeth and things like that as needed. And one of the things that I focus on is airway health. And airway health in dentistry is, I would say, a newer type of dentistry, or a newer facet of dentistry that's been introduced in the past several years. And it's gaining much more focus and attention in our community as dentists, and as medical doctors too. They're much more aware of it now because of the things that we're seeing about airway growth and development, and how kids, especially when they're still growing, how they grow up, and how we can modulate and how we can improve the way they perform as they grow older, and ultimately how we can influence health outcomes and even longevity, how long somebody lives. So that's a really cool part of dentistry, I think. Now, most of what I do is reactive types of things, where I see a cavity and I have to go in and fix it, or I see a tooth that can't be saved and I have to take it out, that kind of thing. This is a part of dentistry that's unique in the fact that I can influence what's yet to happen. Mm-hmm. So I get to prevent things, which to me has a lot more value, because I like to stop something before it starts. If it's a bad thing, I want to try to influence it and redirect it. And in the case of airway, it's children who have a growth pattern that may be getting off course, and there are things that we can look for, little clues that we can see in their growth and development that tell us that problems might be coming down the line, especially for their airways, for their breathing. And so I like to do what I can to help that.
Sure. So how did you stumble into this from your dentistry practice to now doing this course?
By accident. So it happened a long time ago. Right after I first started practicing, I had a patient in my office ask me if I knew anything about airway. And I sort of knew what she was talking about, because we had been briefly introduced to the concept of obstructive sleep apnea back in dental school, but we didn't get a lot of coverage of it. And it was more, how do you treat patients who already have a condition? And it was mostly adults focused. So I was a little bit familiar with what airway issues were and what problems they could cause. And I thought about obstructive sleep apnea as a type of a sleep disease or a breathing disease that like a big football player type would have, because we associate it with obesity and really large neck circumference and things like that. So there wasn't really a big prevention element to that. It was more, how do you treat it? How do you treat the symptoms? But she was asking me about prevention of airway issues, which was sort of a new concept to me. So I ended up taking a course in New York. I went up to New York, took a course, and that was my first introduction to airway. And from there, I just kind of kept track of it. And it wasn't until a few years later that I actually started introducing it into my own practice, and started seeing a lot of patients and doing a lot of consults, and really sort of learning by experience. I took a lot more classes too. This is a very abbreviated, explanation,
Sure.
But I took a lot of classes about it, and then started to see thousands of people, with questions and things like this. So I love it. I think it's probably the most interesting part of what I do. I certainly, again, I'll do the general dentistry, but I like to do the preventive things and fix things fix small problems before they become big problems.
We've talked a little bit like offline about some of the airway stuff that you see as a dentist.
Mm-hmm.
What percentage of people would you say come in that you notice a problem or a possible or future problem with airway health?
A very high percentage, I would say probably 80%, have something going on that would indicate that they could develop an airway issue later on. And that could be anything from crowded teeth to mom telling me that they mouth breathe or they snore at night. As a child, you hear a child snoring, and when I was a kid, I snored when I slept, and my parents thought it was funny. They thought it was cute. They didn't think about, oh my gosh, this is actually really bad that he's doing that. And they didn't know. It's not their fault. It was just, they didn't know what they didn't know. But I hear that now, and I'm trained to think, oh, okay, well, something is very badly wrong. We gotta fix this, because now we know new research that we now know about has shown us that, if a kid snores and they don't stop that, we don't get our arms around that issue, by the time they're about age 8, they suffer cognitive problems, academic issues that are not reversible. So we have to get ahead of the issue. The first time we hear about it, that's the big alarm bell for me that we got to do something, So yeah, this is the reason I find it so interesting, is because it's so prevalent. It's almost everybody who comes in has this going on. And why is that? I don't know. I think a lot of it has to do with habit. I think a lot of it has to do with the modern diet, which is, used to be hundreds and hundreds of years ago. People had to really work to chew their food, and they had to do those jaw movements and exercises and work to chew their food. And it grew their jaws. It grew their airways. Well, now everything's much softer. The calorie count is a lot higher, but the nutrients for the amount of calories that they're getting is not there. So it's much more easy to consume food, not as much work involved. And so I think that leads to atrophy of bone structure and muscle structure. And as a kid, that's really bad. So I think that's one thing. I think the habits, like where you put your tongue and how you breathe, that's another part of it. It used to be that hundreds of years ago, parents taught children how to breathe. They taught their kids, hey, don't have your mouth open. It's not right. You don't want to have your mouth open. You want to keep your lips closed. You want to be breathing through your nose. That was common practice hundreds of years ago. And we just kind of lost that, I think, over the past, since industrialization. I think we've lost that concept of there are certain things you do and there are certain things you do not do if you want to be healthy. And I think we've largely kind of lost those behaviors. And I think that accounts for a lot of it. Some used to say that it was largely genetics of why people develop these issues. And what we've learned since in the past several years is that genetics is not to be discounted. It's certainly a part of it, but it's nowhere near the influence that it used to be, that we used to think of it. It's much more environment. We all have the genetic potential, I believe, to have jaws that are large enough to allow all of the adult teeth to come in without having to remove teeth to keep them straight. And I mean, why would we be designed with 32 teeth or 28 teeth without, if you took out I'll give you the wisdom teeth. Okay.
Sure.
Most people have their wisdom teeth removed. Why would we be designed with 28 adult teeth that we use if our jaws weren't going to grow to accommodate them? So we must be doing something, or not doing something to allow them to come in straight. So,
if our airway health is not addressed, what are some things that could happen as kids age or as we get to be adults?
Are you showing me somebody who's 45 or 50 years old who's been diagnosed with obstructive sleep apnea? And I'm no longer going to be thinking, oh, they're overweight or they have a large neck circumference, because a lot of the people that I see now with sleep problems, sleep disordered breathing, are really in great shape. They're fit. They eat well. They do all the right things. They really have a handle on what they eat and their exercise. So largely, they look really good. But I can see certain things in their face. Maybe like they had a crowded teeth, or maybe they used to have crowded teeth. They had braces, so now they have straight teeth. But what I will do is I will think, okay, what did they look like as a child? So what did this adult look like when they were 6 years old? Go home, grab a picture, go to the photo album at your mom and dad's house and grab some photos of you when you were a kid. Don't show it to me yet, because I'm going to describe to you what you look like. You probably had crowded teeth. You probably had a high narrow palate. When you swallowed, you probably thrust your tongue forward up against your front teeth. You probably used all of your muscles of your face to swallow. You probably snored when you slept when you were a kid, and nobody addressed it. And now here you are with sleep disorder breathing. You have sleep apnea. Now, why that's so important is because this is a mortality issue. This is a morbidity and mortality issue, because people with sleep disorder breathing tend to not live as long as people who don't have that. So that was a reverse way of answering your question. But you see kids with crowded teeth. You see kids with, they wake up with night terrors, night sweats. They wake up a lot at the night to go to the bathroom. These are signs that something's off. Sure. And we have to get them addressed. If we don't, there's a really good chance that down the line, when they're older, they could start to develop these issues, like sleep disorder breathing.
So as a parent, I have 2 little ones. Like, what are some things that I need to look out for, or signs that they have poor airway health?
If you were to go into their room at night while they're asleep, and I encourage all these, especially the moms, if you were to come in and talk to these mothers and say, listen, I want you to go in, bring your phone with you, and I want you to listen to how they breathe. I want you to watch how they're breathing. Check and see if their lips are open. You want them to be closed. Are they breathing through their mouth, or are they breathing through their nose? What does it sound like when they breathe? It should be quiet. They should have their lips closed. They should be breathing through their nose. They shouldn't be tossing and turning. It just should be peaceful sleep. But if it's anything other than that, if they're snoring, if they're making loud noises, that's a sign that there's a blockage somewhere, that the air is not going in and out unrestricted. So something's in the way. Now, if they have a cold, or if they've had allergies or something like that, different story. We can talk about that. But really, if you see little signs like that, that's time to start talking to a doctor or your dentist about it, or somebody who knows. Not all dentists or doctors know about this stuff. It's time to start looking into it and see what might be going on. If they're starting to develop crowded teeth, that's another thing that you want to get addressed really early. I'm going to say one thing. If you go to the dentist and your child's going through a checkup and they say, oh, he's got some crowded teeth, start saving up your money for the orthodontist, because when they're 13, they're going to need braces. Run. Because you don't want to wait till they're 13, because these problems are going to persist. They're going to get worse. And you don't want to be in a situation where the growth has gotten off track for so long that now they're so crowded that the only way to straighten their teeth is to pull out premolars, to take out perfectly good teeth. That's just going to collapse their airway even more over time. There's a cognitive effect of children who snore and children who have trouble breathing. And when I say have trouble breathing, it doesn't mean that they are gasping for air necessarily or anything like that. It's small little things, small little restrictions of the airway that will tip you off. Like if you notice that a child is snoring consistently and it's loud enough to be heard in the next room, that means that they're struggling, that their heart and their muscles are working harder while they're trying to sleep than they would when they're awake, just trying to breathe normally.
Sure.
Okay, because nobody snores while they're awake. So the airway is not collapsed while they're awake. So they can breathe when they're awake. It's when they're asleep and their muscles relax that they have this issue.
So they're actually working harder.
They're working harder while they're asleep than they would during the daytime. So they're not getting rest. They need the rest. They need to be able to recover. Sleep is the time to recover from all of the insults of the day, from all of the difficulties. If you work out, that's the time when your muscle tissue heals. You've torn your muscle tissue down. and you've been to the gym to lift weights, or you've been, had soccer practice or basketball practice or football practice, you're worn out. So you've got to heal from that. The first half of the night, your body's healing. The second half of the night, your mind is healing. Your cognitive abilities, your memories are being cemented. I mean, all of these things are happening. And if the sleep gets interrupted, or if you're constantly being brought, if your brain is telling your body to wake up or to get into a lighter stage of sleep because you're having trouble getting the oxygen carbon dioxide balance that you need, then you're going to do that. You're going to do that for self-preservation. Mm-hmm. You're going to stay alive before getting a great night of sleep. So you're going to be spending less time in deep sleep, that's the part of time. That's the time when you have to really heal. So if you can't do that consistently, you're going to suffer. You do that over years, it's going to be a long-term cognitive deficit. Mm-hmm. And I've heard that the age 7 or 8 years old, if it happens year after year, if you start to notice it when a child is 3 years old or 4 years old, and they do that from then and consistently until they're 8 or so, there's a really high chance that they're going to suffer a learning debt or a cognitive deficit that they can't really get back. They can't get that potential back. So, and it doesn't mean that they're going to not be able to perform academically. Sure. It just means that they will not perform up to the level that they might have.
They have to work harder.
Yeah.
That's wild.
So
you would never think to most people wouldn't think to attach cognitive growth or development in school to breathing or airway, which is wild. And obviously, we've talked a lot about the reasons, like why airway health is important. So you created a course to kind of address it. Tell me a little bit about the course.
Yeah. So the reason I started the course, and the course is really, I'll talk about the reason in a minute, but basically what the course is, it's, I could have made it really long and take hours and hours and hours, but I edited it, had to edit it down to about 3 hours because I wanted to make it digestible and an overview of a lot of information in a short period of time so that people could listen to it, and they could listen to it over and over again and really be able to get an understanding of what the problem is. And the reason I created the course was because there aren't that many people outside of my profession, I feel like, that know what the problem is. Mm-hmm. And the cost of not knowing what the problem is, or not being able to at least know where to begin solving the problem, is so great as a society. I mean, it's a huge cost on an individual level to not know this stuff.
Sure.
It's a massive cost on a societal level not to be aware of these things. And just from the standpoint of healthcare costs as a country, as a nation, and in the world, many, many, many billions of dollars are spent on trying to alleviate the symptoms associated with obstructive sleep apnea and other airway issues. So the cost is immense if we don't know about it. So I know that people are really good at diet and exercise. Mm-hmm. It's talked about all the time. We talk about it with our coworkers, our colleagues. We talk about going to the gym. We talk about eating healthy and things like that. Nobody ever talks about airway.
No, it's true.
And I think about airway as being this this crucial third leg of one of those three-legged stools. Mm. And if you only have two legs of a stool, you're still not going to have a stool. You can't use it. You have to have the three. You have to have that tripod, to be able to use the stool to sit on. So I see a lot of people who are great at diet and exercise, and their airways are awful. They have sleep disorder breathing, and they have all of these chronic health issues, and they don't know why. It doesn't make sense to them. Mm-hmm. And the reason they don't know why and it doesn't make sense to them is largely because nobody's ever exposed them to this airway component, which is I think a piece of the puzzle that they need to have if they really want the full scope of health.
You don't hear this really from your pediatrician, or
they don't know about it, or at least they've heard about it maybe.
Yeah. But
it's been so skimmed over. They're not focused on it.
Sure.
It's not that they're averse to it or they don't like it or disagree with it necessarily. It's just they don't know for the most part.
Yeah.
I think that'll change in the next 5 to 10 years. I think that's gonna improve a lot. But most people outside of healthcare are not aware of these things. There are more and more moms that I meet who are investigating this stuff on their own because intuitively they know something's not right with their kid. They don't know what it is, but they start digging, and they can get online and start reading, and they can read their research papers and things like that now that they have that available, and they can learn.
And there's been a few podcasts, like I know Joe Rogan probably talked about it a little bit.
Oh yeah,
and
yeah.
There's
James
been
Nestor on with his book, which is huge. It was a great book. It was right on point too. Yeah. Look, as healthcare professionals, we have access to all kinds of information. I can go get training about this stuff, the best training in the world on this stuff. I can go out to Arizona and take a class or anywhere I want because I know about it.
Yeah.
I'm aware that the issue exists and I know how to treat it. But as far as I know, there's no class out there for moms. There's nothing out there for people who aren't in the community, who even know to look for it.
Sure.
And that's what this course is for. It's to get the information out there to people who wouldn't ordinarily get the access to the information. It's to first shake people up and make them aware that this is a really big problem, that there is something you can do about it, but it's extremely time critical. You need to do it with your child at a very young age. If you're an adult and you're worried about yourself, you can do some things, but ideally you start when you're growing, when you're still growing, because you want to correct course on your growth pattern. And I do it I feel really urgent about it because my goal, sleep apnea, sleep disorder breathing, terrible, terrible health problem, but we already have it now. I'm not going to get rid of that in this generation. But my hope is that I can educate enough moms, enough parents about it so that they can start looking at this in their children and hopefully greatly reduce or effectively eliminate the issue 20 years from now, 30 years from now.
Well, and I think one of the things that you dive into in the course, a lot of and you go into great detail in the course, is the solutions for most of the time are simple, like almost things you can do at home.
Non-surgical type things.
In rare cases, there is surgery involved, depending on their bone structure and stuff, right?
I'm talking mainly about, what we would call normal growth and development. I'm not, there are obviously outliers where a child, the development maybe from a genetic standpoint, growth has gotten so far off track that only surgery can help it. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the vast majority of situations where you have a child and you're just now starting to see little early signs, and there's stuff that you can do that's simple, that's rigorous. It's going to, don't get me wrong, this is going to take a lot of habit correction, and habit correction in children is not easy. And it's going to take time and consistency and failure, and then getting back up and trying again and continuing on like that. What I'm saying, though, is that if you do those simple things, not easy things, but simple things, over again, over a long enough period of time, you're going to change the way your kid develops. You're going to change the way they look, and you're going to change the way they feel, how they perform academically, how they perform athletically. And I'm going to go ahead and say it's going to affect how long they live. It's not going to be the only thing that determines that, but it's going to be one factor in their longevity. And studies bear that out too. That's real stuff. So, yeah, it's mostly non-surgical stuff that can help.
Well, and two, you show in the course, I think you show in the course, you showed me people that have gone through some of the therapy and some of the processes. It actually changes their natural, like the look of their face. It almost does.
Yeah. It changes the look of the face. So, you've heard the term form follows function. If you can improve the function of something, the form of it's going to become more aesthetic. And that's born out in nature. I mean, in natural selection and evolution and things like that. If you've got something that's much more functional, it tends to be more aesthetic. It tends to have symmetry, which is a huge component of function and form. And it tends to be beautiful. You know, that for lack of a better word, it tends to be beautiful. And so you see people with healthy airways, okay, who their jaws have developed to their maximum potential. Okay, they've done the right things. They've gone through the non-surgical interventions that you can do at home. They've kept their tongue up in the roof of the mouth. They breathe through their nose. All that stuff. They're going to tend to have stronger bone structure, higher cheekbones, more prominent cheekbones. That's really great if you're trying to breathe well. It also happens to be not a bad thing, attractive. Mm-hmm. You know, they have symmetry in their eyes. They have symmetry in their mouth, and their lips, and their teeth. Their teeth tend to come in straighter. That, to me, is not the most important benefit. It's a cool benefit, you know, when your teeth come in straight. That's what we all kind of want, you know. So it's a form following function. When you improve the function, the form tends to go in a better direction. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, there's many numerous aesthetic benefits. Adults who have this tend to look younger as they age. They tend to age well. Part of the reason for that is because they're sleeping better.
Yeah.
They're actually getting recovery from their sleep if they're breathing well. They're not working harder while they sleep to get rest. It's really, you think about how you work really hard during the day. You have no trouble breathing during the day because your airway is actually active and upright and you're not collapsed. But when you go to sleep, the time when you need to heal, you're actually your body's trying to rest. And that's not the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
You know, it's a bad irony, you know, because if you're having to work harder to rest at night, then there's an issue there because you're not healing. You're not healing from the previous day. So that's a cumulative effect over time. The damage is. Mm-hmm. And, you see all kinds of things like hypertension and type 2 diabetes and chronic fatigue and joint pain, arthritis, inflammation. So this creates inflammation in the body all over the place. And part of that is due to release of bad hormones that you're not supposed to have released. You know, bad substances like cortisol from the adrenal glands. You know, you don't want to be releasing that cortisol hormone, that stress cortisol into the bloodstream while you're trying to rest. You want to be in rest and relaxed state, not fight or flight state. And when your body's working hard to try to stay alive, literally while you sleep, you're in fight or flight. So you're not getting rest. You're not getting the healing that you're supposed to get.
It makes a lot of sense. I mean, I just picture, somebody's 45 or 50 and they're just now learning about this whole thing. And maybe they have sleep apnea and it's due to bad airway health. And maybe not, because there's probably hundreds of reasons for sleep apnea or other sleep disorders. Like, is it too late for them?
No. Well, so yes and no on that. So I would say from a prevention standpoint, a lot of the opportunity has passed. There's still things that they can do to improve the situation, though. And I'm talking to myself here because I'm in that boat because I didn't know about this stuff when I was coming along and I suffered for it. So I had airway issues. I still have airway issues that I'm working on. What I would say to somebody who has obstructive sleep apnea is, and especially if you've been to your doctor and they've recommended you do a CPAP or something like that, definitely do it. Don't stop doing any of those things. Do what they say. In the meantime, there are things you can do. So first of all, depending on how your bone structure developed, how your face developed, and I'm going to go into the realm of surgery here. There are surgeries that can be done to improve the situation, to widen the palate, things like that, if you've got the means and the time to do it. If you don't have that opportunity, if you can't, for whatever reason, don't have the resources or whatever, you can do things that are non-surgical. If you have a tongue tie, you can get that evaluated, and you could possibly get a tongue tie release, and that help your airway. And there's a whole long explanation for why that would be the case. But assuming certain other things are in place, like you have a wide enough area in your mouth and your palate to be able to accommodate your tongue, that might be something that would help you. You can do exercises called myofunctional therapy that has shown now in research. There's studies out there now that are showing people with severe sleep apnea. There's mild, moderate, severe sleep apnea. So there's a gradation of it. And sleep apnea is pretty much the pinnacle of bad airway issue. I mean, there's a spectrum of airway disorders, of breathing disorders. And at the very bottom of the spectrum, you're talking this person mouth breathes.
Sure.
And then it goes up to snoring from there, ever and ever increasing severity. And at the top of that mountain is mild, moderate, severe sleep apnea. So if you've got severe sleep apnea, that's a pretty serious thing, but even then there's things you can do. So if you can find a good myofunctional therapist, that right there is such a great thing to do, because it basically you're working out your airway, you're strengthening your airway, so that even when you're asleep, you've improved your airway volume and function. And this is even if your anatomy is not conducive to it. You can still do that and get some help. And I've seen research about where, you've got people with a moderate to severe sleep apnea on myofunctional therapy. Sometimes they get a tongue release procedure, and greatly reducing the severity of their sleep apnea, maybe going from severe down to moderate, or from moderate down to mild. And that makes a huge difference for people. Yeah. Some people get off their CPAP in that way. And I'm not telling people to stop their CPAP,
sure.
But what I am saying is that there are non-surgical ways, even as an adult, as a fully formed adult with inability to change your bone structure, there's things that you can do. Hope is not lost. The thrust of the course, though, is that even then, that said, please, mom, please, dad, look at this, start looking at this right after your child is born. And how do you notice what's going on right after, in infancy, right after your child is born? Well, it starts with breastfeeding. Is there trouble with breastfeeding? That's a clue. That's a clue that they might have a tongue tie or a lip tie or something like that. That's where it begins. So yes, there's things you can do as an adult, but I always bring it back around to prevention. I want to stop this. I want to stop the flow of the problem. And it starts with childhood.
Sure. Is there any misconceptions people may have about airway health?
The one that comes to mind right now is this notion, and we've been conditioned to think this way. I was conditioned to think this way, that snoring is somehow normal. Snoring is a pathology. We got to get that straight, and if you have a kid who snores, that's like, think of that as an alarm going off. We got to get on that. Snoring, so the difference between common and normal. Common means it's very prevalent in the population. Normal means it's okay for it to be that way. It's extremely common to snore. I feel like almost everybody does. It's not normal. It's not a variation of normal. It's a pathology, and it's a signal that worse things are coming down the line.
Interesting.
That's a big misconception. I think that's probably the most important misconception is that about snoring and loud breathing while you sleep. If that's going on, it's not okay. We think it's funny. Like, when I was a kid, I remember my parents, we would be on a long car trip or something like that, and I would fall asleep and I would start snoring in the car, and they would be laughing like, "Oh my God, listen to this kid. It's so cute." And they didn't know, and I'm not mad at them for that, but that is what I'm talking about. If I hear a kid snoring, I'm like, "Oh no, that's not good."
Yeah.
But, it used to be thought of as it's like humorous or something, it's kind of like a funny thing, but it's not. It's actually a really bad sign that something's off, and we got to deal with it pronto.
Yeah. Absolutely.
That's the biggest misconception, I think.
Can you, are there any success stories, any stories of maybe people that have gone through the course? I mean,
yeah.
That you can.
And patients that I've treated.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Most of them are, there's a few adults. Most of them are children, because I see a lot of kids in my office. I regularly treat kids who had trouble getting through the night without waking up. There was an issue with bedwetting. There was an issue of waking up with night terrors. By the way, these things are all signs that these things can all be traced back to airway. If you have a kid who's wetting the bed, there's a hormone that is released at night when you are sleeping soundly that keeps you from having to get up to get pee. It's called antidiuretic hormone. And as long as you're releasing that, you're going to probably be able to get through the night without having to go to the bathroom. But if you're in fight or flight, that gets cut off. You're not going to have that in your body, and you're going to wake up and you're going to have to go to the bathroom. So that's a signal to me that something's off. So, I've had plenty of patients come in and say, oh, okay, I'm having this trouble with sleeping. They snore. They wake up with night terrors. They wake up with sweats. All of these things that point to sympathetic fight or flight, stress while sleeping or trying to sleep situation. And getting them on a program, myofunctional therapy, and I'm really lucky in my office because I've got access to 2 myofunctional therapists. I've got a speech therapist who's a myofunctional therapist that I'm happen to be married to, and then I have a hygienist who's also a myofunctional therapist who's brilliant and gets this stuff too, and they're able to tie all these concepts together, which is really cool. But we can do myofunctional therapy, we can do the exercises, we can put them through appliance therapy, things like that, and mom comes back and says, they're sleeping through the night now. They're getting through the night. They're waking up well rested. Their academic performance has improved. Their athletic performance has improved if they're an athlete, usually as teenagers.
Sure.
And it happens all the time. It's regular. Once you correct the habits, we're designed to sleep well. We're supposed to be able to sleep through the night and get a good night of sleep and wake up ready to go. Mm-hmm. There's just things that get in the way. There's roadblocks. And what I do, I'm not doing anything special. I'm just teaching the mom to teach the kid to remove the roadblocks consistently enough so that they can change the tone and the nature of their airway so that they can start getting to the night on their own.
Yeah.
And then they feel better. So those are the results we get in months. It takes work, but we do get those results. I teach them how to do it, mm-hmm. and they execute the exercises, and they go through it.
Is there anything else you want to add about the course or airway health?
Yeah. I mean, if you want to take the course, you can go to airwaymattersmost.com, and you can go from there and learn about it and take the course there. You won't get it all in the first pass. It's a lot of, it's dense material, and it's a foreign concept to many. I think a lot of people are waking up to it, but I think it's a foreign concept to many, and it'll take time to get the concepts, and that's okay. It's a process. I think it's extremely important. I think it's probably more important. I think it's the most important thing that I do as a dentist. I think it's more important than fixing teeth. It really is. I fix things that have already happened. Most of the time, that's what I'm doing. Yeah. I'm fixing broken teeth. I put crowns on broken teeth, and I take decay out of teeth. And I love doing that, and there's value in that, and I appreciate the privilege of doing that. But I will say this. It's not anywhere near as fulfilling as knowing that I might be helping somebody live 10 years longer. I like that way better.
Well, and they feel better and they're happier too, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So again, not only are they more likely to live a longer life, but that time when they're alive they're going to be more awake for it. They're going to be more alert. They're going to be smarter. They're going to be healthier, less prone to disease. I'm not going to claim to eliminate disease here. What I'm going to say is that they're going to be healthier overall. They're going to feel better, way better. So I like that the best of all. I think that's, the coolest thing about what I do in dentistry is that if you breathe through your nose instead of breathing through your mouth, you're going to get 18% more oxygen efficiency. That's huge. To have 18% more oxygen. If you're breathing through your mouth, probably up to 18% less oxygen, so you're not getting efficient gas exchange. So that's one thing. If you're breathing through your mouth, so this isn't just an airway issue, this is an immune system issue. If you're breathing through your mouth any time during the day, you're breathing unfiltered air. Our nose is like our HEPA filter. It's our air filter. You breathe in through your nose, and the air goes in dirty, and it goes into the lungs pretty clean. Like 80% of all viruses, bacteria, anything, impurities are trapped up in here. When you breathe through your nose, or when you breathe through your mouth, that's not happening. But when you breathe through your nose, another thing happens. The air passes over the sinuses, right? So you bring the air in. It goes through these little series of baffles in the nose called the turbinates. it passes over an area called the sinuses, paranasal sinuses.
Mm-hmm.
And when it does that, an interesting thing happens. It releases nitric oxide. Now, nitric oxide is a vasodilator. It relaxes the blood vessels. And it does many, many things. But while you're asleep, it allows you to just completely relax. It allows the right hormones to be released and the wrong ones to not be released. Mm-hmm. Keeps you in that relaxed state. It does so many good things. Keeps the heart rate nice and low. Keeps you very calm. When you're breathing through your mouth, no nitric oxide is released. So there's a tendency for constriction, for the heart to have to work harder. If the airway collapses and your airway is not healthy, you're going to get oxygen. Your body's going to make sure that you get oxygen. Your brain is going to tell your heart to pump faster. It's going to tell the muscles in your neck and your upper chest to contract harder to breathe, to make sure that the oxygen goes in like it needs to, because instead of breathing through a nice big airway that's like a large conduit for air, you're breathing through a straw. Now, you can breathe through a straw. You can do it. You just have to work really hard to do it, and it's not nearly as efficient, and your heart rate's going to go up, and you're going to be under stress. That's what's happening to people when they have sleep disorder breathing, because their airway is not large enough. They experience this every night. They just don't think about it that way. Mm-hmm. It's happening though. And over time, if you do that for long enough, it's going to be devastating to your health. You're going to be set up for other things to happen, chronic health issues, chronic disease, inflammation, you name it. A lot of bad stuff, that tends to make life miserable and short, But yeah, certainly, look, nasal breathing is really the only way you're supposed to breathe. Yeah. And it's the only proper way to breathe. The mouth is for eating and talking. And again, I'm mouth breathing a little bit right now as I talk. That's what I'm talking about is at rest, when you're sleeping, or when you're just sitting around reading a book or whatever. You should be breathing through your nose. If you're eating, or if you're eating, no, you're breathing through your nose too, because your lips are supposed to be closed. So yeah, if you're eating, you're breathing through your nose. If you're talking, you're going to be breathing through your mouth some.
Sure.
If you are running really hard and you're sprinting really hard, you might start out breathing through your nose, but eventually you're probably going to switch to mouth breathing for a little bit of time,
Yeah.
Unless you're training and you're only allowing yourself to breathe through your nose, which is great, by the way, to do. That really gets you into shape fast. But nasal breathing is so important, and it is directly correlated with your immune system function and how well you do fighting diseases and fighting off certain other illnesses and viruses that we won't talk about on a podcast. But sure. yeah, it's incredibly important. So, yeah.
That's awesome. I bet you most people don't think about if they're breathing through the mouth or nose on a day-to-day basis, but I bet you they are right this moment.
Right now, they're probably thinking about that. I'm thinking about it right now. Like, how am I breathing? Right. But no, yeah, we should be thinking about it.
Yeah.
And I tell people when they first come in to see me, and I know that they are quote unquote a mouth breather. And by the way, to define a mouth breather would be somebody who breathes through their mouth anytime. And yeah, that's if you do it a little bit, that means you're a mouth breather. But I would say be hyper aware of it at first. You have to be constantly aware of what you're doing at first, and then once you developed a new habit, then you kind of go on autopilot, and you kind of realize, oh, okay, well, I was breathing through my nose. That's how it's supposed to be. So there's times when you can forget about it, and if you do it long enough, it becomes a new habit.
Sure.
That's the way it should be.
I've noticed, you'll have people like do that, breathe in, hold it, breathe out, and they always demo it, and it's through your mouth. But I've noticed if you do any sort of breathing exercise and just do it through your nose, it's does relax you. It seems more efficient. It seems more effective.
It is. It's more efficient and more effective. And it relaxes the blood vessels. It relaxes your cardiovascular system, and your heart rate slows down. And there's ways to clear your nose if you have a congested. You've got to be able to breathe through. You've got to have an unblocked nasal passage in order to use your nose to breathe. But there's things that you can do to even clear your nasal passages out. There's a book out there by a fellow named Patrick McEwen, and he wrote a book called Close Your Mouth or Shut Your Mouth. Close Your Mouth, I believe. Close Your Mouth. And he teaches people techniques on how to, it's called a nose clearing exercise. It's great. It's a great book. I think James Nestor talks about that too in his book.
They'll go to extremes of even taping your mouth shut and stuff too, right?
Yeah, I do that. Yeah. That's a great thing to do because it keeps your lips closed, especially if you're trying to train yourself to nasal breathe at first. Starting off with taping your lips closed is a really great thing to do because, if you're asleep and your mouth comes open, where you're going to start breathing through your nose, you'll probably start snoring and things like that. So it's a great training aid, at least at first, and it gets you used to breathing through your nose. And it's kind of like a muscle too. When people are not used to breathing through their nose, it's harder to do it. Yeah. The more you do it, the more you practice it, the easier it gets. So it's like your nose becomes accustomed to it again, and then you gain the ability to do it a whole lot more easily. The more you work it. It's like going to the gym. It becomes easier over time. So the more you do it, the easier it is.
That's awesome. Yeah. So tell us again how to find the course and, what to expect when you go through the course. Yeah.
So the course was just released. It's called Airway Matters Most. It's airwaymattersmost.com. And when you get into the course, when you start the course, you're just going to be met with me, talking and giving background information and some history about the issue. And I would say the first part is more about alerting people to the issue and the consequences of not dealing with it. And then as we go through the course, I get further into it. I start talking about children first, and then I go into a bit about adults toward the end of the course. But I talk about some strategies and some things that you can do. And I also talk a little bit about how to vet your healthcare provider for knowledge on this topic. So you want to make sure that the doctor or the dentist that you go to, that they are at least aware to it and they know about it. They don't have to be an expert about it, but they need to be able to engage you in a conversation about it. Nowadays, that's just got to be, 5 years ago, I think it would have been acceptable to be a dentist or doctor and not know this stuff. But now you just have to. It's a much more known thing than it used to be. So to be able to properly vet a healthcare provider, know what questions to ask, and to find, I talk about how to find a myofunctional therapist. I think that's probably one of the biggest things you can do for yourself. Yeah. And I would even say people who are quote unquote healthy, have healthy airways, I think everybody should do myofunctional therapy because it's like, I liken it to, it's the best prevention. I liken it to going to the gym and working out, except it's for your airway. So it's just a strengthening. It strengthens your airway. So the muscles of the face, the tongue, all those things that deal with the mechanics of breathing, it exercises those things and makes them better. So there's no downside to it. I think everyone should do it. I think some people need it more than others. Sure. But that's one of the things I stress in the course is just the importance of that and talking about how to find that and some ways to go about it, some things to avoid. The course is an overview. Yeah. It teaches people what they need to know to get started, to get going on it. It gets the ball rolling for them, and it makes it easy for them to get there, to get where they want to go.
Mm-hmm. I think it's been a great conversation. Anything else you want to add before we close out?
No, I encourage people to really look into this because again, I said this before. I think in healthcare right now. Well, I mean, what we've been through in the world the past 3 years, is directly related to breathing. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's so tied in with it. I mean, I think it's more important than it ever was. I think that if people do the things that I'm talking about in the course, they're going to change their lives. It's literally going to change their life. And I think if enough, you get a family who's suffering from their child waking up in the middle of the night and waking the parents up, or health issues or things like that, and that's miserable. But if you can correct that and help a kid feel better, that is going to have a ripple effect on the entire family unit. They're going to, sleep better. Mom and dad are going to sleep better. The parents will sleep better. The siblings will sleep better. The family's going to be more well rested. Mm-hmm. They're going to be more alert. They're going to be more in tune to each other. Life is going to be better. The awake hours of life are going to be much better. They're going to go out into the community and have a better day, and they're going to make everybody else's day a whole lot better. And if everybody else in the community were to do the same thing, everybody's lives would. Nobody's going to be perfect. I'm painting a utopia here, okay? But what I'm saying is that overall things are going to improve, and you get enough people together that are feeling better and are in a better mood and healthier. You're going to have better communities. They're going to be stronger communities, and you get a bunch of communities together to do that. You're going to have a stronger country. I mean, it's just going to help everybody. Sure. It's going to help. And it's going to help everything down to the finances of the healthcare system. It's going to be less of a strain on the healthcare system.
Sure, absolutely.
And overall, it's just a great thing. Going to make the world a better place. I hate to say it like that, but it's true, really. Yeah. So,
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, Dr. Duncan, thank you so much for joining today.
Yeah, thank you. I've enjoyed it.
And everyone else, thank you so much for listening. We'll put all the details and links and everything in the show notes. And until next time, thanks for watching.